truth connecting Korea and the world. Your pick, Arirang News.
In our headlines on this Monday, February 10th, here in South Korea. The U.S. will impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminium imports, as well as reciprocal tariffs on countries that levy any such import duties on American products. Meanwhile, here in South Korea, the Constitutional Court launches its final week of hearings for President Yoon's impeachment trial, but pundits believe these sessions may be extended. And the state-run Korea Development Institute believes the South Korean economy continues to face external risk factors, especially in light of the Trump administration's tariff campaign and its broader implications on global trade.
U.S. President Donald Trump is announcing on this Monday a blanket tariff of 25% on all steel and aluminium imports into the U.S. Sarah Pakono covers these intentions and more.
The tariffs imposed by the U.S. are intensifying. On Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump said he will announce plans for new 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum shipments to the U.S. He also said reciprocal tariffs for countries that impose tariffs on the U.S. will be revealed in the coming days and will take effect almost immediately.
If they charge us, we charge them. But if they are charging us 130% and we're charging them nothing, it's not going to stay that way. Every country will be reciprocal, that's right.
This comes as the ongoing trade war between the U.S. and China has intensified. The U.S. implemented an additional 10% tariff on all Chinese imports to the U.S. starting last Tuesday. In retaliation, China announced plans to impose tariffs of 10 to 15% on items, including coal, liquefied natural gas, and crude oil from the U.S., effective Monday. As China previously expressed its intention to negotiate with the U.S., there had been an expectation that an agreement would be reached before actual implementation. Last week, Trump also shared his intention to talk with China's President Xi Jinping, but said he was in no hurry.
No, we'll speak to him at the appropriate time. I'm in no rush. The deficit with China is about $1 trillion. Think of it, $1 trillion. They're using our money to build their military. And Biden let that happen.
That's compared to when he delayed the implementation of additional tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a month after some discussions. But as both the U.S. and China have expressed their intention to hold talks, pundits believe there's still a chance of reaching a consensus. The two countries previously ended the trade war during the first Trump administration after 18 months, after China agreed to purchase more U.S. products, while the U.S. held off on imposing additional high tariffs on Chinese goods. 박건우, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in Paris on this Monday, the two-day Summit for Action on Artificial Intelligence begins with world leaders, industry heavyweights and related scholars poised to take part in the latest gathering. The event seeks to set up standards and solutions for more sustainable, ethical AI advances for universal progress and broader public interest. It also follows the first such meeting at Bletchley Park back in November 2023 and here in Seoul earlier in May last year. Also this week, the Trump administration will actively seek talks with its European counterparts to end Russian aggression against Ukraine. Our Lee Sing-jae has details.
U.S. President Donald Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, said Sunday that Washington will hold talks with European officials this week on how to end the Ukraine war. Speaking to NBC's Meet the Press, Waltz said a delegation, including the U.S. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Vice President, and the U.S. Special Envoy to Europe will hold talks on ending the war. The national security advisor did not go into details, but said that Trump is ready to bring the Ukraine issue to the table this week. This includes the issue of future American aid to Ukraine. However, Waltz stressed that the U.S. needs to recoup the costs through a partnership with the Ukrainians over its rare earth and natural resources, all of which are going to be discussed this week. While Waltz says Trump will end the war, the security guarantees will be up to the Europeans. The announcement of the high-level talks comes as the New York Post last Friday reported that President Trump has spoken to President Putin about ending the Ukraine war. In an interview aboard Air Force One, Trump said he spoke on the phone with Putin to try to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war, but would not say how many times the two leaders have spoken since his return to the Oval Office last month. While Trump did not go into specific details of their phone call, he said that Putin wants to see people stop dying, adding that the 3-year-old war never would have happened if he had been president in 2022. The Kremlin has neither confirmed nor denied that the two leaders have spoken on the phone to discuss ending the war. Lee Sing-jae, Arirang News.
The Unification Ministry here has urged UN member nations to uphold Security Council resolutions against North Korea while raising issue with the regime's labor exports to Russia. Now, these latest remarks follow recent intelligence reports here that assert North Korea had sent thousands of workers to Russian construction sites last year. The reports claim these soaring labor exports are driven by the, quote, ever-present demand for young labor in Russia's Far East. The 119th U.S. Congress includes Marilyn Strickland, a Democrat representing Washington's 10th district that also houses the largest military installation in American West. She's also a Korean American who believes firmly in the security alliance between the U.S. and South Korea. Our Choi Min-jung reports.
Korean-American Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland, one of the first 3 Korean-American women elected to Congress and re-elected to represent Washington's 10th district for a 3rd term, affirmed that the Seoul-Washington alliance will remain ironclad regardless of South Korea's current political landscape. In an exclusive interview with Arirang, Strickland addressed the implications of South Korea's domestic political turbulence regarding President Yoon's impeachment, noting that while the situation is unfortunate, it exemplifies democracy in action.
It's why you have separate co-equal branches of government to serve as checks and balances. So in many ways, what happened is a prime example of how democracy is meant to work and supposed to work. We want to make sure that we are staying strong with our partners and allies who value and uplift democracy.
With former President Donald Trump returning to the White House for a 2nd term, concerns over the continuation of America First policies, including increased defense cost sharing, are mounting. However, Strickland noted that despite media speculation, no formal discussions have taken place.
And so we want to make sure that it's being done fairly, we're doing it conscientiously, but understanding that having military presence in Korea is important, again, for a free, safe, and open Indo-Pacific.
An area of concern for the Korean American community is Trump's intensified immigration policies, including deportations. Some 150,000 Koreans living in the U.S. are reportedly subject to deportation following a Trump administration order. 20,000 of those are believed to be Korean adoptees who have not yet received U.S. citizenship. Strickland expressed concern, saying immigrants play an essential role across all sectors in the U.S. and that the American economy will collapse if they are deported simply for lacking documentation.
So as a Korean American, as someone who values, immigrant talent, I definitely want to make sure that we're able to stop Trump from doing the wrong thing, but finding a way to do the right thing as well.
The rise in Korean American political representation, exemplified by Strickland, signals a growing influence that will not only strengthen ties between Seoul and Washington, but also shape the broader political landscape of the Korean American community in the U.S. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The Constitutional Court launches its final week of hearings for President Yoon's impeachment trial starting tomorrow, and it has yet to announce whether or not more sessions will be held before its verdict on the case. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young has the latest.
The Constitutional Court has not yet announced whether it will extend President Yoon's impeachment trial, which is scheduled to wrap up this week. A court official told reporters Monday that the 8-member judicial bench has not yet conveyed whether additional hearings will be held beyond this coming Thursday. With time running out and just 2 hearings left at the Constitutional Court this week, making an extension is likely. On Tuesday, the court will hold Yoon's 7th trial hearing with 4 witnesses summoned to testify. First up will be former Interior Minister Lee Sang-min, who is expected to be questioned extensively about the meeting of cabinet members held before the martial law declaration on December 3rd last year. The National Assembly's impeachment panel says the president had bypassed cabinet procedures before imposing the decree. Also standing witness will be National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik, who served as defense minister until September last year. Shin is likely to be grilled over whether there was prior planning before December 3rd. As for former National Intelligence Service Deputy Director Baek Jong-wook and National Election Commission Secretary General Kim Yong-bin, questions are expected to focus on election fraud allegations raised by President Yoon as a pretext for declaring martial law. The 8th and final hearing is currently scheduled for Thursday.
In order to conclude the hearings, the bench must hear the closing arguments from both legal teams as well as President Yoon's final statement. It seems the Constitutional Court has not yet instructed either side to prepare their final arguments.
Meanwhile, the court on Monday concluded hearings on a dispute case regarding acting President Choi Sang-mok's decision to withhold the appointment of Constitutional Court Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk, while appointing 2 others recommended alongside him. The case was filed by National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik, who claims Choi neglected to follow a parliamentary resolution to appoint 3 justices in December last year. Choi, however, had pledged to appoint a 3rd justice after bipartisan agreement on the candidate. The court initially planned to deliver its ruling last Monday, but accepted Choi's request for additional arguments to be made. Choi's side said Monday that Speaker Woo had unilaterally filed the case by bypassing a plenary session vote, thus the dispute should be made invalid. The court says it will reach a verdict and notify the involved parties. The question of Ma's appointment has caused a strong political standoff, as the left-leaning judge would become the 9th member of the judicial bench as it rules on President Yoon's impeachment case. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Korean economy continues to face external risk factors, especially in light of the Trump administration's tariff campaign and its broader implications on global trade. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has more.
Concerns about rising risks to South Korea's economy are being raised in light of trade tensions between Washington and Beijing. On Monday, South Korea's state-run Korea Development Institute reiterated these concerns for the 2nd consecutive month in its February economic trends report. The agency stated that the domestic economy remains in a moderate growth phase in terms of production, but deteriorating external conditions are increasing risks. The report emphasized the escalating trade disputes, particularly involving the United States, as well as the persistent political instability in South Korea, both of which have heightened concerns over worsening trade conditions. The KDI had first raised alarm about growing downside risks in its January Economic Trends report, marking the first such warning since January 2023. The report highlights sluggish domestic demand, with private consumption and construction investment recovering at a slower pace than expected. At the same time, export growth, previously a key driver of the economy, is beginning to slow, particularly in sectors excluding semiconductors. The KDI noted that high interest rates and weakened consumer sentiment due to political instability have contributed to continued sluggish consumption. It added that retail sales have continued to decline across most categories, extending the downturn in goods consumption. Amid prolonged weak domestic demand, the number of employed workers declined in December, signaling a slowdown in job growth. Investment trends were mixed. While facility investment, particularly in the semiconductor sector, showed resilience, construction investment continued its steep decline due to a significant drop in completed projects. Financial markets also remain volatile due to external risks, particularly uncertainty surrounding the new U.S. Trump administration. On inflation, the KDI noted that recent increases in the exchange rate and global oil prices have contributed to higher consumer price growth, but weak domestic demand is exerting downward pressure on inflation. In January, South Korea's consumer prices rose by 2.2% year-on-year. However, the KDI suggested that if private consumption remains sluggish, inflation is likely to slow in the coming months. As concerns over weak domestic demand, slowing exports, and external uncertainties grow, the KDI's continued warnings signal heightened risks for South Korea's economic outlook in the months ahead. 문혜련, Arirang News.
And against that backdrop, main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung called for recovery and growth as national priorities amid the ongoing political uncertainty. Addressing the National Assembly today, Lee suggested a supplementary budget of 30 trillion Korean won, or around $20 billion to be earmarked for economic recovery. Separately, he also proposed the introduction of a 4-day workweek system, claiming that reducing working hours is key to becoming an advanced technological society. Meanwhile, government officials and ruling lawmakers have shared intentions to invest over 3 trillion Korean won, or some $2.2 billion on strategic defense technology by the year 2027. According to the agreement announced on this Monday, the support will be extended to 10 related sectors, including artificial intelligence, space technology, and advanced materials. Financial assistance worth up to 5 billion Korean won will also be granted to top small and mid-sized firms and relevant industries to sharpen their edge over the global competition. Over in LA last Friday, Squid Game Season 2 was awarded for Best Foreign Language Series at this year's Critics' Choice Awards. Now, the show's first season, that is, claimed the honor at the 2022 edition of the awards, becoming the first Korean TV drama to do so. Korean actor Lee Jung-jae also clinched Best Actor in a Drama Series back in the year 2022. Other nominees in the same category for this year included Pachinko Season 2. Meanwhile, Season 3 of Squid Game is set to be released on streaming platform Netflix in June. In other news, researchers here have developed an eco-friendly mechanism of purifying the air by using water without producing waste. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
Worsening fine dust due to the cold weather has increased the use of air purifiers. However, the need to change filters and waste issues have become a problem. To solve these, researchers have developed an eco-friendly air purifying system that imitates the body's circulatory system. Once polluted air enters the system, microbubbles form in a water container as they pass through an elastic microprocessing filter. The small, even-textured microbubbles capture fine dust and carbon dioxide, sending carbon dioxide outside and oxygen inside through the circulation of water.
We have developed an air purifying system by imitating the human body's circulatory and respiratory system. We can circulate the air inside and outside through the system to dispense VOC and carbon dioxide outdoors. It can solve the issue of micro dust and carbon dioxide at the same time.
In tests using a closed space with a mouse inside, the system decreased the level of carbon dioxide by 30%, which saw the mouse's activity increase 53%. Current system's performance deteriorates as filters age and can cause odors. The new system does not require filter cleaning or changing as long as the water is renewed.
The system's driving principles and structures are quite simple and suitable to enlarge in scale, and they can replace pricey and complicated former air purifying systems.
The research team expects that the system will be able to purify air of other pollutants, such as acetone or ethanol. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In a significant move under the recent ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, Israeli forces have withdrawn from a strategic area in Gaza. On Sunday local time, the Israeli military completed their withdrawal from the Netzarim corridor, a critical route that previously divided the Gaza Strip. The move, which will help facilitate the free movement of Palestinians between the northern and southern regions of Gaza, is part of the recent ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Following the withdrawal of Israeli troops, displaced Palestinians have begun returning to their homes. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump, speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, has reiterated his idea of the U.S. taking ownership of the Gaza Strip, suggesting that sections of the territory could be allocated to other Middle East states to aid in reconstruction efforts. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has used AI-generated deepfake videos of himself to promote the Paris AI Summit. The French president released a series of deepfake videos on Sunday featuring his likeness to promote the Paris AI Summit, set to kick off on Monday local time. The videos, shared across his official social media platforms, depict Macron in various scenarios, crafted using advanced AI technology. The innovative approach aims to underscore the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence and provoke discourse on its ethical implications. On the eve of the event, Macron and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shared their thoughts on the importance of leveraging the benefits of AI in an inclusive manner while minimizing risks. The third AI Summit will be held for 2 days and will gather leaders from over 80 states. In Europe, the Baltic states of Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia have officially disconnected from the Russian electricity grid and joined the European Union's energy system. The transition on Sunday, which had been planned for several years, marks the end of their dependence on the Soviet-era energy network and aims to improve regional energy security. The move was celebrated in a ceremony attended by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The merge involved disconnecting from Russia on Saturday and operating as an independent energy grid for 24 hours before linking to the EU grid through connections with Poland, Finland, and Sweden. In Africa, Namibia's first democratically elected president and revered founding father, Sam Nujoma, passed away on Saturday at the age of 95. He had been hospitalized for weeks due to illness in the country's capital, Windhoek. Nujoma led Namibia to independence from apartheid South Africa in 1990 and served as president for 15 years. Before becoming the country's leader, Nujoma had spent almost 30 years in exile. He was officially recognized as the founding father of the Namibian nation in 2005. The current president of Namibia announced a period of national mourning for Nujoma, who was dubbed a freedom fighter. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The second week of February also started in the freezing cold. There were places where snow has fallen along with this cold wave today. Currently, cold wave warnings and advisories are still in place in many parts of the country today. This long cold wave will gradually ease off as the temperatures rise from tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, dry weather warnings and advisories have been issued around the East Coast. Gusty wind is also expected today in these coastal areas, so please take extra care not to cause any fires. Tomorrow morning will start off at below 0 degrees in most parts of the country, with Seoul at -5 degrees and Gwangju at -4 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 6 degrees in Seoul, 9 degrees in Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Busan. On Wednesday, the first full moon of the Lunar New Year, it will rain or snow all over the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stooky that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and...
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
Traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace, or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
The phrase friendly footing has been used by One American daily to describe the first summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba that took place at the White House last Friday. With more on Mr. Trump's diplomacy and its broader regional implications on Press Perspective today. Hope this work week is off to a good start for you. You're watching Press Perspective for Monday, February 10th here in Seoul. I'm Min San-hee. Today we touch upon what has been shared about that is the Trump administration's foreign policy thus far, given the U.S. leaders' most recent summit, this time with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba at the White House last Friday. For more on this, I have Anthony Kuhn with American public broadcaster NPR here in the studio. Anthony, it's been a while since we've had you here. Welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I also have freelance journalist Jack Barton with us. Jack, we haven't had the pleasure of your company in a while. It's great to see you again.
It's great to be back.
Right, Anthony, we'll start with you. Let's begin with details of the most recent summit hosted by U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House, which took place last Friday with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. What were some of your takeaways from that summit?
Well, I think it was an extremely important meeting for a lot of countries, particularly South Korea, to watch. To see how a major Asian ally of the U.S. and a major regional power dealt with the risk of a Trump administration and his America First policies. On another level, there's a certain mundaneness, a sort of routine quality to the meeting, just because you know, the U.S. alliance is a bedrock of Japanese foreign policy, and every Japanese leader has to be seen to be managing the relationship well. And so in that regard, Ishiba did check off a number of boxes. He reassured Trump about the value of the alliance, the fact that Japan has been the biggest direct foreign investor in the U.S. for the past 5 years, and that he's going to commit even more, about $1 trillion, particularly in the auto sector. And he got some of the guarantees he was seeking from President Trump, including that the nuclear umbrella will stay up and open over Japan. It will include the disputed Senkaku, or in Chinese, Diaoyu Islands, which are disputed by the two countries. There are many things which were not resolved. Japan may still be subject to tariffs. There was a lot of discussion of the Nippon Steel proposed acquisition of U.S. Steel. The two agreed that it would not, Japan would not be taking an ownership stake in the company, but we don't know exactly what the terms of that deal will be, whether it will be mostly psychological to buffer the shock of an iconic American company being purchased by a foreign company. Also, people expect Japan to come under pressure for Trump to pay more for the cost of defending the country. That issue was apparently not raised. But the policy direction of the Trump administration is certainly concerning to Japan. The isolationist trend, I think, speaks to their fears of abandonment. And it's a big change from the past 4 years when President Biden was talking about being a global partner with Japan. The U.S. is now sort of retreating from that global role.
For now, though, Anthony, the BBC claims that the Japanese Prime Minister's Trump study sessions, if you will, paid off. Do you agree?
Well, we know that Shigeru Ishiba spent the past weekend huddling with his ministers at his residence to talk about how to establish a personal relationship as a tactic, as a way to take the pressure off Japan. And he seems to, you know, by most accounts, he seems to have acquitted himself pretty respectably. If you look at some of the techniques, some of the things he said, for example, he commented, Ishiba commented on a picture of Trump who had just been grazed by a would-be assassin's bullet. And he says, oh, I believe you, you know, you thought at the time that you must have been chosen by God, which is why you survived. And Trump himself had said something like this. Also, Ishiba tried to leverage the afterglow, if you will, of the late former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who sort of set the gold standard for managing Trump, stroking his ego, famously deploying golf and sumo wrestling tournaments and Wagyu burgers, which apparently helped to you know, get Japan away from some of the tariffs that Trump had threatened. At the same time, it's not easy, I think, for Ishiba. He describes himself as a defense otaku, a defense nerd. He's not really a sort of backslapping good old boy type of character. If you're expecting him to follow President Yoon's example and croon American Pie, I think you might be sorely disappointed. He did say some things which show his difference. He said, for example, we will not be beefing up our military spending because the U.S. tells us to, but because it's in Japan's interest. And so he's sort of staked out this idea that America will put its interests first, and we will do the same with Japan.
Right. Jack, for global leaders who have yet to engage with Mr. Trump and his threat of tariffs, what cues might they take from Mr. Ishiba's talks with Mr. Trump?
Well, I think that, you know, the key takeaway there is stroke his ego, but also preemptively consider what it is he wants and then prepare to give it to him before he asks. And that is one strategy. It's a strategy we're probably seeing most people try and adopt, not just outside of the US, but even in the US in terms of politics. That tends to be a response that Trump is generating of late. How far does it work, though? So this was a successful meeting, but if we look at Trump threatening, say, Canada with 25% tariffs, and then Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, moving in very quickly with some largely decorative moves, but aimed at giving Trump a win in the public sphere, so naming a sort of an anti-drug czar for the border to stop fentanyl coming in, even though reports show only about 1% of America's fentanyl come in from Canada, but also, you know, setting up some anti-drug task forces, things like this. And then we have the 1 month reprieve, but now we've got these steel and aluminium tariffs, 25%. That Trump has declared, and of course, who is that going to hit hardest? Well, that's going to hit Canada. And then so you appease Trump one day, and then, but who knows what's going to come in 1 week's time, and then, so perhaps Mark Carney is right, who's an advisor to Trudeau's government, but the former central bank governor, not just of Canada, but also of Britain, when he said about a week ago that the only way to deal with a bully is to stand up to them. And we know that Trump respects strength. He doesn't respect weakness, but it would require unity amongst leaders. There would have to be some kind of united response because America is so powerful. Trump is capable of sort of going around and picking off people one at a time if they're not united. Unfortunately, we just seem to be in a period of disunity, particularly those who advocate for liberal democracy don't seem to have much of a voice at the moment. Their camp seems to be in disarray all around the world. So, you know, whether a united front can emerge is very much in doubt. And in the meantime, you know, Trump is going to be rolling out his strategy with sort of shock and awe, outrageous sort of suggestions just to see what somebody does, to see how far he can rattle them and maybe get a halfway concession that would have been much beyond what he would have got with a reasonable response so he can claim a big victory. And yeah, leaders looking at what do we gain from appeasement in the short term? Can we unite for a strong approach? I don't think there's any one way. We're only 3 weeks in. It's going to take a little bit more time.
Right, for sure. Jack, during the joint press conference after his talks with the Japanese Prime Minister, President Trump reiterated his intentions to engage with North Korea. What are your thoughts regarding this upcoming plan?
I think it would be good if it happened, but it would be much, much more difficult than the last time it happened. Now, so many things have changed. Of course, when it happened the first time around, Kim Jong-un was very outward-looking. He was trying to bring North Korea kind of back into the world, to get sanctions lifted, much more positive in his outward outlook. But I think after the 2019 Hanoi summit, both sides got an idea of just what a massive disconnect, because there should have been a deal there. What a big disconnect there was between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, of course, wanting sanctions relief before anything happens. So, you know, there is this massive disconnect. It's clear that that hasn't fundamentally changed. On top of that, you have a much more inward-looking North Korea, very focused on consolidating internal strength, building up its weapon stockpiles of nuclear-capable missiles. You have a new alliance with Russia, so you've given it a new strategic partner. You have China, clearly very annoyed at the alliance with Russia, but also knowing it can't, you know, completely disengage with the DPRK. So, yeah, Pyongyang playing these different cards, and, you know, and just the world is so different that we're in right now. Trump is very different in his second term than the first term. The world, so many things going on, and Trump much more domestically focused, or focused on the countries that border America, focused on the immediate region, not really caring about what's going on so much elsewhere, which may have also been why Japan got a bit of a pass. So yeah, look, it could happen. It'd be great if it did happen. Obviously, the terms would have to be now recognizing North Korea as a nuclear state. I think disarmament's completely off the table, but it's going to be so much more difficult now because of all these other elements, and plus Kim Jong-un will know that what Trump really wants is the publicity, you know, a good photo opportunity, and you know, so he's very aware that this is what drives Trump, the imagery rather than the substance, all of which is going to make it very hard.
Right. A growing number of pundits have been echoing Jack's thoughts as well, that if the talks between the U.S. and North Korea do take place this time around, they will be much tougher than they were the last time. I'm assuming, as a correspondent based here in this part of the world, you probably agree as well.
Well, I see different sides of the argument. On one side, I think one thing that's very convincing is people point to the letters that Kim and Trump exchanged. And in some of the final ones, Kim basically felt that he had invested so much of his own personal prestige in this diplomatic efforts with Trump, and when it collapsed, he really felt burned. He felt played. He says, you know, you've basically taken me for a fool here, and he just doesn't, you know, want to go back for that. He's made this strategic shift, you know, to partner with Russia, a deal which he seems to want to seal with blood of North Korean troops fighting in Russia, and also sort of portraying himself and North Korea as a staunch member of an anti-imperialist alliance, a sort of anti-imperialist coalition along with China and Russia and Iran. So it's hard to see him going back. On the other hand, if you look at North Korea's record, often the rhetoric can give way when it suits North Korea's purpose. At some point, the war in Ukraine is going to finish, and then, you know, what will become of Kim Jong-un's leverage when he has to bring his troops home? How much will that blood that's been shed serve to hold that alliance together? Suppose Trump makes good on sort of his indication to recognize North Korea as a de facto nuclear state, and then focus, as some progressives have suggested, focus instead on an arms control deal. Now, the essence of what was discussed in Hanoi in 2019 was giving up a part of, you know, the North's nuclear programs in exchange for sanctions relief. And I think what some people take away from North Korea's record on this is that they will keep up the tough rhetoric until they see a really fine opportunity, and then all that rhetoric will fall by the wayside, and they may come back to the table.
Right, I see. Jack, against this backdrop of potential engagement with North Korea, what role do you suppose can South Korea seek to play, especially amid rampant concerns that it might be sidelined from fresh talks between the U.S. and North Korea?
Yeah, well, South Korea has traditionally played such a strong role as a moderator, as a mediator, or a driver of diplomacy. If we look back at the early 2000s, Sunshine Policy and the economic engagement, the diplomatic engagement, the people-to-people, you know, the visits for the families, and that all seems like such a long time ago now. In the future, it will again somehow have to play this important role, because it is pivotal to what can be a long-term peace or any long-term deal. But at the moment, it just seems impossible. One, because of the political paralysis in South Korea at the moment, until this criminal court proceeding is wrapped up, until the constitutional court impeachment hearings are wrapped up, and whichever way that goes, either to the return of the president or the stripping of powers, a snap election, 2 more months of political paralysis while that's sorted out, and who knows who will win, because we've seen the ruling party come back in the polls. We've seen the opposition party fall away, and whether that's because of the good job the ruling party is doing or a kind of souring of opinion on the opposition, I mean, I won't venture an opinion on that here, but while this is all going on, it's sort of impossible for South Korea to play any meaningful part in a process that may or may not emerge, and of course probably very difficult to play a meaningful part in negotiations with Trump as well, which may serve South Korea well in the short terms and sort of put it on the back burner. But at some point, yeah, you know, a leader needs to emerge who has a vision of what South Korea needs to do and has the diplomatic skills to move that forward, because South Korea is crucial to that diplomacy, and at some point it has to re-enter into that diplomacy. But from where we sit right now, that seems quite a way off, at least a year or so away.
Right. And with regard to South Korea's bilateral ties with the U.S., how does the return of the Trump administration look to perhaps challenge as well as to consolidate the alliance between Seoul and Washington, do you think? Well, I think that it seems that there are a lot of policies towards South Korea and the region which have yet to be decided. There are some big differences between different players within the Trump administration. For example, you know, what sort of end-state relationship do they seek with China? Do they want regime change? Do they want some form of coexistence? What do they plan to do about deterring any Chinese move towards Taiwan, and what role would South Korea play in that? Of course, you know, would they want to use South Korea as a base for any military maneuvers centered on Taiwan? That could cause big problems for the U.S. What about the contributions to the cost of stationing U.S. troops here? You know, the U.S. and South Korea tried to get that squared away before Trump came back to power, but is the arrangement immune from President Trump trying to rejigger it? Then, you know, the economy is front and center right now. Today, the Trump administration announced tariffs on steel and aluminum. And of course, South Korea
exports a lot of those to the U.S., partially because it's making so many things now, such as cars in the U.S. and Mexico. And so that has pushed the South Korean trade surplus with the U.S. up. You know, we've just finished 4 years of the Biden administration in which the U.S. has tried to friendshore or relocate production either to the U.S. or to Mexico to secure supply chains, to rebuild the U.S. industrial base, to win over Democratic voters in swing states. But now this is all in doubt because President Trump seems to be indicating that he doesn't want to subsidize companies like Samsung and Hyundai to open factories. He'll just say, if you don't move your factories here, you'll be hit with tariffs. Can South Korea say no to this? Do they have anywhere else to move their production? It's a huge question, and the future of you know, what's going to happen to South Korea and other U.S. allies as the competition between the U.S. and China heats up is quite concerning.
Right, again, many questions and so few answers. Jack, Mr. Trump is also scheduled to sit down with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House this week. What should the international community be keeping its eye on?
It's going to be an interesting meeting because both Modi and Trump are leaders who rely on their charisma a lot to get things done, and they like interpersonal relationships. So it's all about the personal relationship. I think they will probably strike an amicable enough chord. It's unlikely we're going to see the US making big threats to India, but also from what we're hearing from the Indian media, and again, we don't know until the meeting happens, it does seem like Modi might be preparing some preemptive sort of tariff reductions on certain goods coming in from the United States. We've seen some lists in the media, but of course we don't know, you know, what is really on the list or not, if it is there. And also for India to lean in to the deficit discussion. I think India runs up a surplus of about $30 billion a year with its trade with the US, which is India's biggest trading partner, and sort of for Modi to lean in and say, well, yeah, you know, we would like to reduce this down and sort of narrow the gap. So we might be something similar to the meeting that we saw with Japan, but it also has its unique characteristics in the way that Japan is such a strong defense partner, such a big investor in the US. India also has sort of a neutrality arrangement in that it shifts, or its alignments with countries. It's very good at playing nations off against each other. It always has been very good at that. And we've seen India join the Quad because of tensions with China, but now that it's repairing relations with China, of course, the US needs to look in and try and bring India into its orbit. So it's definitely in Trump's interest to have some outreach towards India as well, and ensure that the relations with China aren't mended so much that it begins damaging relations with the United States. So, you know, Trump will be saying, look, you need to buy more of our agriculture, you need to buy more weapons, probably more fighter jets, you need to buy medical equipment, and probably Modi will be saying, yes, you know, we'll do this and we'll reduce some tariffs and we will try and do this. Some of it will be substantive, a lot of it might be tokenistic. But again, I don't think this is going to be earth-shattering news. I might be proven wrong, you know, unlike Trump and Netanyahu meeting and, you know, sort of the crazy we're going to turn Gaza into the Riviera statements coming out of it. I don't think we're going to see something like that. But yeah, again, a big focus on trade, and beneath that, a focus on security as well, particularly in the relationship with China.
Right, and speaking about China, Anthony, China's counter tariffs against the US are in effect as we speak. Do you envision an all-out trade war between the US and China during Trump 2.0?
Well, based on what China has said and done so far, they seem to be taking a fairly, you know, tit-for-tat approach to this. In other words, countermeasures that are commensurate with what the U.S. side does. They have a full toolkit of ways to make the U.S. hurt. That includes export controls on important industrial ingredients, export restrictions on companies that help arm Taiwan. But I think, you know, China seems more confident at this point. They've spent a lot of time working on their economic security, on reducing their vulnerability to U.S. measures, insulating themselves from that and relying on their own internal market. And I think they feel that time is on their side. And if they can just sort of muddle through the next 4 years and let the U.S. undermine itself, they can sit back and reap the rewards when the time comes.
Right. Well, we have been told that China has been better tailoring its tariffs, so to speak. We'll see. All right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Anthony, as always, thank you very much for your insights today.
My pleasure.
And Jack, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Always a pleasure.
Right. Well, that ends Monday's edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
Curious about